Hello and welcome to the Fabulous at 50 podcast, celebrating a vibrant global community of women over 50 through entertaining interviews that will inspire, educate, and empower. Your host, Joanne Neweduk, was born to nurture and promote vibrance. Joanne is both the Community Director for Calgary, Canada, and oversees the global operations for Fabulous at 50. As an oncology nurse, integrative practitioner in multiple modalities, life skills mentor, and manager, Joanne moves people from challenging situations to positive outcomes through the use of her innate gifts and learned skills. Here's your host, Joanne Neweduk. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Fabulous at 50. And I have the most fascinating guest on the show today. And Karen, I want to welcome you to the show, but we're not going to jump right into the conversation just yet because I want to read your bio.
Thank you.
Karen Stollznow is an American-Australian linguist and author. She is a researcher at the Griffith Center for Social and Cultural Research and was formerly a research associate at the University of California, Berkeley. Her books include Language Myths, Mystery and Magic, Would You Believe It, and God Bless America. Karen is a host of the popular science podcast, Monster Talk. Now, if that doesn't have your attention right off the bat, I don't know what does. So welcome to today's show, Karen.
Thank you, Joanne. It's great to be here.
I want to correct something. I called you an American Australian, but you're actually an Australian American.
I didn't think it really matters. I think I was born in Australia and I've been living here in America for 15 years or more. But it doesn't bother me which way you say it.
Okay, fair enough. Just wanted to get that straight. That does suggest. And you're living in Colorado right now, I understand?
In Denver, yes, that's
right. In
Denver,
yeah. That's like a bit of a sister city to Calgary and being close to the mountains, right?
Oh, yes, yeah, it is. We're right next to the Rocky Mountains here.
Absolutely. And we are just quite a bit further north. And we are just coming out of a deep freeze. We don't
get anything
nice
like
again.
that.
We just had a very cold spell.
Oh yeah, we get a couple of days of snowfall and then the sun comes out and it melts. We don't get those weeks and weeks of coldness. Luckily.
Lovely. Well, I'm so thrilled that you were joining us today. And the title of your book, your most recent book, really caught my attention when your assistant offered to share a copy with me, called On the Offensive, and, prejudice in language, past and present. And I thought this is and I know that one of your chapters talks about ageism. And so, of course, for my community and the Fabulous 50 community, this is something that has come up at different times. So I wanted to bring you on and just have a conversation. But as I got to know a bit more about you, you're just a fascinating woman. So it'll be hard for us to stop and say, okay, that's enough of the conversation. Let's carry it on. But why don't we start, first of all, with this book? What led you to want to write about this book? Like, what was your inspiration?
I've been researching bad language and racism and sexism for decades now. Okay. And certainly over the last 4 years with the administration that we've had in the United States, a lot of these topics just came to the fore and are very important. And of course, these things are always important. A lot of people have asked me, did you write this book in response to what's been happening? Well, I think that these things are always taking place. There's always ageism, there's always sexism, there's always racism, unfortunately.
Right. That makes total sense. And, but this is not an easy topic to talk about. So
it's very difficult and it can be depressing to read about too, but I think that there's a lot more awareness about these kinds of topics today, a lot more interest, a lot of people who are trying to do better and to be more respectful and polite in their language. So I think that's a good way to look at it.
That's a good way of putting it. I honestly believe, and especially, going through this book, there's a lot of phrases and terms and words that are embedded in our language that people use that don't even I think they're, like some people are like they're truly offensive, right?
Right.
As you said,
Yeah.
what's just been going on. They are overtly offensive. There is no question about it. Maybe
Yes.
they don't realize. But then I find there's people that are just sweet, nice people. And it's like, do you know what you just said? Did you find that people just aren't aware of what's coming out of their mouths and don't even realize what
Yes.
they're saying?
You're absolutely right. There's certainly the more offensive language, insults and slurs, and often people know that they're being offensive and they're trying to offend people. And then other times, racism, sexism, ageism can be more hidden. It can be something that we don't even realize. And usually that is, it can be a matter of it hasn't been our own experience to face racism or sexism, and therefore we can say something and not even understand why it's offensive. So that's what this book is about. It really covers the whole range of truly blatantly offensive language through to microaggressions and other phrases that on the surface might seem like a compliment. But if you really think about it and you look at what is implied, it can be deemed to be offensive.
Yeah, you list a few of them here, and I notice actually I've had this book for months, and I only just realized the extra wording behind it, and
Yes.
just the classic comment like, "I'm not a racist, but you look good for your age." She was asking for it. You're crazy. That's so gay. Like all of like some of them, they think it's just, oh, no big deal. It's an expression.
Right.
What did you find ones that you had, like, were you amazed at what, as you were digging, was there anything that you found that you realized in your own self that you went, oh, I didn't even realize what I was doing there?
Absolutely. And so I look at thousands of phrases and words in this book. And so every single page is just chock full of these phrases that we use all the time and that we've normalized,
Yes.
that we've internalized as well. I do talk in the book about this internalized ageism, where when we're very young, we hear a lot of ageist phrases and we just accept them. And then the older we get, we adopt them and we start using them. I find myself looking in the mirror sometimes when I'm doing my makeup and thinking, oh, I look okay for my age. So it's another one of those, it's the kind of thing that someone might say to us, and it's intended to be a compliment, but it also implies, oh, looking young is good and looking old is bad, and has lots of negative connotations. But we absolutely do say these things to ourselves, and I hear them all around me all the time. And again, this book isn't about telling people how to speak. It isn't saying don't use this language. It's really about identifying prejudice terms and trying to explain why they're offensive, to go back into the history of these terms and to see what they used to mean and what they mean today, especially what they mean to the communities that they're used against.
Oh, absolutely. That makes total sense. I know for it now, this is along the same lines. I actually have a book. It's one of those, leave in your bathroom and you read a page or so. And it was phrases and terminologies. They weren't necessarily offensive, although some of them were. When you understand, I'd like to know not just what does it mean, like, I don't know, the one that's coming up, I don't know if it was, it could be offensive in a sense, but it was like, something like poor is slipshod. And I was like, well, what does that even mean? And it's like, oh, the people that were very poor couldn't afford real shoes. They just had a little slipper on to go out and muck in. So they would be stepping in the actual muck in boots. And, it just went on, but it was fascinating for me to learn about where it came from. Not just what does it mean, what's it implying, but how did it even start? And through that, you could probably say this is most of the nursery rhymes that we all grow up with and go around and that we innocently are saying to our children, when you study them, they're horrifying.
Well, yeah. And in the chapter on ageism, I don't only look at stereotypical ageism, which is ageism directed towards older people or people who are middle-aged and older. I think that's when we think of ageism, we typically think of something that's ageist towards middle-aged people going through a midlife crisis or old people, that kind of thing. But ageism can be experienced by young people too. It's usually called childism or adultism. And I find I've got a 5-year-old son. And I often try to stop myself if he does something naughty from saying, oh, you're a brat or you're a monster, because those can have negative connotations too, and just reinforce negative stereotypes. And even talking about the terrible twos, it's usually what the parents go through and what the parents experience, rather than the children being inherently naughty or bad in some way.
Exactly.
So it's really just a matter of trying to have an open mind about a lot of these phrases, and to look at their history, but also to realize that what's offensive to us is constantly changing. So this book probably won't be relevant in a couple of decades when things have changed. And if we look through history, terms that used to be very offensive were blasphemous terms or profane terms. Even if we go back a couple of decades, the F word and the C word and the S word were all of those dirty words that George Carlin said we can't say, or society says, and you can't say them on TV or radio.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Nowadays, a lot of blasphemous terms have lost their punch. You can say words like bloody, and it's probably not going to be too offensive to too many people. But certainly terms that imply racism and sexism, and reveal negative attitudes towards groups of people on the basis of the color of their skin or their gender or sexuality. Those are the things that are deemed to be offensive. So it's hard to make predictions about what will be offensive in the future, but certainly I just want to put it out there that it's a changing thing, and that context matters as well. You might be able to say something to your husband or your family that you can't necessarily say to other people. And certainly if we're talking about rude words and bad words too, then that's different too, calling someone those terms.
Different terms, exactly. And I think you touched on something. There really is like the intention behind it and the power.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But there is that, even when the intention wasn't there, that, basically offhanded comment can be offensive to someone with us not even realizing it. And I think it's just more, for everything we've been through in this past year, and it's been, and I'm not just talking about the pandemic, it has been a very upheaval all around the world.
Absolutely.
And it is, my wish for the world is at the end, as we come out the other side, that we're more empathetic to each other. We're
That's
more willing
key
to do what you say I got my little bookmarks here. In the conclusion, I really love walk a mile in someone's shoes. That is an old saying that really says a lot. And
I tried to not be too preachy by saying things like that, but it's hard to write a book where you talk about this kind of language without making some pronouncements, and to really close, to say in the conclusions, to talk about what this kind of language means to the groups that it's used against. But I think that I do make the point in the introduction that we have phrases like, oh, I didn't mean to be offensive. And so I think by and large, people don't want to be offensive. I don't think that they want to be hurtful. I think that their intentions are usually good. And again, certainly you have people who want to be offensive and want to hurt people. And they're usually from more privileged groups, and they don't really understand what it's like to be the person who's the target. And so again, as you mentioned, empathy, that's really important, to be empathetic towards others, the way that we want people to be empathetic towards us.
What's coming to mind right now is the book, The Four Agreements, actually. And, one of them is like, don't take offense. So I would love to touch base on that. Obviously, we, as say the recipient of listening to other people, like this is just the flip side of the same coin. We can't walk around and be filtering what everyone else says to us. And so I think there's twofold. I think we as humans need to, be more conscious of what we say. But what's your view on, because I know through my own personal development, like I get way less offended at what people say. Like what they're saying is more about them more than me. So I've chosen in the past to not take offense easily. And what's your thought on that? Did that come up with researching the book?
Yeah, I do treat that to some extent in the introduction. And so people do think, oh, well, if you don't take offense, then you're strong. If you take offense, then you're somehow weak or a snowflake, that term that we've heard a lot over the past couple of years. So I really think it's up to the individual. I think it's a great thing if someone can say something and you can maybe step into their shoes and think, well, this is why they said this. They didn't mean to hurt me. this is what they meant. So that's great. But if you take offense too, then more power to you, really. If you want to explain to people, well, that's offensive, and here is why. Obviously, you need to pick your battles. Sometimes it might be the kind of thing that you can discuss with family. Other times, absolutely not at the Thanksgiving table. You don't want to talk about things like this necessarily.
Maybe not the best topic to bring up with, crazy uncle so-and-so, and,
Indeed. It's but sometimes you might deal with a stranger and they say something that's ableist or something that's ageist, and it's not the job of the person who's the target to always educate other people either. And sometimes that can really open you up to what I call in the book is a kind of forced intimacy, to be telling people, well, I have a disability and here is why, here's what's going on. Sometimes people might want to do that. They might want to educate others. At other times, they might not want to. It's too personal to have to go into these kinds of things. Yeah. But I think it's just a human reaction to take offense to things that are said. And certainly if they're said by people who just don't understand why something is offensive, I think that it is just a human reaction to be offended. And maybe you can talk to your significant other about it and get it off your chest, or talk to friends on Facebook or something. But I really wouldn't condemn any kind of reaction to something that's offensive, because you don't know what that person's going through.
Exactly. What I'm hearing from this and my thought, I know I tend to be one who protect people, is that mama bear comes out. And I think it's important, actually, just like in bullying, offensive language is a form of bullying. And, there's the bully and the victim and the bystander. And I think it's really important, if nothing else, that this book, if somebody sits there and goes, I don't use offensive language, I think this book is important for us all to read. One, to see where are we and we don't know. Mm-hmm. Second, though, where can we pick it up? Not that we're wanting to pick a fight, but can we help educate someone? Can we protect someone we care about by speaking up on their behalf? The ones that are more vulnerable.
Yeah, and sometimes it can make you complicit to racism if you hear a racist comment and you don't say something. You're not being an ally to other people if you hear a sexist comment or an ageist comment. But again, depends on the situation. You don't want to get yourself into a fight or an unnecessary argument with a stranger. But yeah, I would say we hear these kinds of things every day, and I think that contributes to that internalization of these insults, and to just normalize them and make them okay, and to then repeat them. I mean, sometimes I certainly won't say that, having written this book, or if you read this book, that you will be somehow perfect having finished it, because I say things all the time. I make mistakes. I say something and realize I'm trying to be polite to a stranger I'm talking to in a coffee shop or something like that, and that I might have said something that could be misconstrued. So it's really just about educating yourself about this kind of language and thinking about the words that you use, because words matter. But not necessarily being too hard on yourself. And certainly you'll continue to use terms that might be offensive to other people. And I think it's important to listen to others. And if they say, look, that's offensive, to try to understand why, and to just think about your language as best as you can.
There's a real simple remedy for a lot of it, is if you have offended someone, simply go, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it doesn't have. You don't have to defend yourself why you said it. Whatever, just say
true,
right? And
I think
ourselves that way.
I think our immediate instinct is to say, "Oh, I didn't mean to say that," and but to be open-minded enough to see any bias, or to see what could potentially be offensive, and to address that is a good thing.
Right. So we mentioned how this is, it's definitely a difficult topic. It's one where people get polarized. While you were writing this book, was there a particular aspect of it or a segment of it that kept you up at night? Like what was the hardest segment for you?
I think every chapter had difficulty because I think one of the reasons, if I can say my book is important, is that it really cuts across the population. Ageism is something that we're all going to experience. Racism, maybe not necessarily, but our friends might experience it, or our family. Me being an immigrant, then I experienced not necessarily racism, but certainly prejudice and discrimination for having a different accent and for being different. And being a woman too, experiencing sexism, experiencing lookism. I mean, I've been larger in the past and then smaller, and so I've changed my size and being yes, lookism. So being discrimination against people on the basis of the way that they look, if they're too skinny in your mind, or too fat, or they dress like a goth. So that kind of discrimination. So I think that these are really things that we're all going to experience. We're all going to have that Achilles heel. And so, yeah, it was difficult because going through the chapter on racism and talking about immigration recalled to me so many instances of discrimination that I've experienced, and how lucky I have been too, belonging to privileged groups, that I haven't experienced more. And then sexism too, just writing the sections on harassment and assault. I mean, these are things that are so common. The Me Too movement, it's happened to lots of women. And the chapter on ageism, writing about nursing homes and infantilization of older people, and seeing my father experience that. So a lot of these things hit home. And so I think that anyone reading the book is going to have those moments where, oh, it really cuts to the core, and this really resonates with me, and I've experienced this. And then other times when you might read something and think, oh, that's ridiculous, that's not offensive. And I think plenty of people have that kind of reaction to the book and to words in there. So again, I think it's a matter of, well, you might not find it offensive, but someone else might. But certainly, I think every chapter hit home with me as the author, and it could be difficult.
Absolutely. And really, as I'm listening to you, there is something for everybody in there. You know, like I don't think anyone can read this without being able to go, I identify with that. But what I do love is at the end of the book is how you do wrap it up into more of a positive swing, because as much as words have the capacity to hurt us, injure us, in the sense of, hurt us, I think also when it comes from people that we care about, it's more offensive. There's probably
it is. It's so much more personal. If you have a stranger say something to you, well, they don't know me and they don't understand. So that's one thing. But if it comes from a relative, if it comes from a loved one, that can really hurt and be very painful for sure.
Yes. And I had someone talking about just the other day, they were saying something in a playful way. What is playful in their household? Just like you said, words that were once not playful, like that were an issue in the past. Now people banter it around. It's like if it's your best friend and you're saying to each other, it's almost a term of endearment, which is kind of odd. She had the misfortune of just kind of saying it, and she was going by the common room and where she lives, and shouted out to the ladies there, and two of them she knew very well, one she didn't know as well. And when she sat down, and she is the sweetest, most empathetic woman, but this other woman called her on it and said, I find that offensive. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like she had forgotten, because she was past that being offensive. Like that wasn't offensive in hers. But that other woman had come from a situation where her ex-husband had used it as a weapon against her. And so it cut to the core. So I think it's one of those things that if words can be used either way, we need to be careful. But what I love,
sting. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, it can really sting if someone says that's offensive or you've insulted me. It can really feel like a reprimand, and like someone's being critical of you. But I think if we can be expected to not be offended by things, then we can also expect that it's okay for someone to come back and tell us what they think.
That's right. But I do, as you were winding near the end of the book, just, your the last few lines, that language can show, this is on the flip side, that as much as language can be used as a weapon, in a sense, it's used to bind us. That's as you said, language can show solidarity and commonality. It reflects our diversity, and And the last one, language is a symbol of our shared humanity, and we can use it to nurture understanding, acceptance, and equality, which is just a beautiful way to, wind up this book that touches base on things we need to talk about.
Yeah, I think it needed some positivity towards the end after a barrage of offensive language to say that, again, that words matter and the words that we choose are important, and that we can, words are very powerful, and we can pick and choose our words, and that they are of importance and can really change a situation. I'm just thinking at the moment of how, I don't want to get too political, but how the current administration is wanting to change some of the language that is being used in immigration policy. Instead of talking about aliens, to talk about non-citizens. And so to be more positive and more precise and accurate, and also to avoid using the term China virus, and to talk about coronavirus, COVID-19, that kind of thing. So you can really see the impact that certain words can have.
Yes, the slang that we've put out there. Yeah, absolutely. Because those are offensive terms, and we've known that, and it's just amazing. I think to sit back and watch, though, how many people don't find it offensive. And I think that's the whole point. And it's our own responsibilities to look inside ourselves and say, how do we want to show up as human beings to our fellow human beings in this world? And we need to make that choice.
And I think, again, if you're not offended by a term like alien or China virus, then that's because it's not affecting you at all, and you belong to a privileged group. So again, it's putting yourself in someone else's shoes and just thinking about what it's like to be someone else, just as you want people to be respectful and polite towards you. There's a lot of negativity around terms like political correctness, but really it's just about being respectful and being inclusive and polite. And what's wrong with that?
Just being kind. So we're actually getting really close to the end of our talk here, but what I'd love to do quickly. I know it does go quickly, but we still have just a couple more minutes, because I end all of my podcast episodes with this, and I want to ask you, what would be your 3 pearls of wisdom? Now, it can be around this book, or it could be about something else. I mean, honestly, the titles of your other books just fascinate me. You really dive into juicy topics. So what, for the listening audience, what would be your 3 sort of Karen's pearls of wisdom for going through life, perhaps?
This is so difficult. I think maybe one is to keep an open mind, to try to not be closed-minded and narrow-minded about things, to listen to other people, and even if you still think that they're wrong, to possibly see the merit in what they're saying.
Absolutely.
I think also to be aware of our biases. I think that in this book there are a lot of stereotypes and preconceived ideas. So I think to try to be self-effacing and to be aware of any bias that we have in our thinking, and those blind spots that we have in our thinking. I think that can really, it can make you a lot happier too, to just recognize your biases and to kind of fight against them. So I guess that's 2.
Yeah, that is so wise.
I think another is maybe to, and I guess this kind of encapsulates some aspects of the 2 I've just mentioned, but to try and be worldly, to try and, it's a good thing to travel. Obviously we can't at the moment, but you can certainly travel by way of being on the internet, watching documentaries, reading books. So being informed and trying to see what it's like for other people in other parts of the country and in other parts of the continent or other parts of the world. I think it can just really just open your minds to how other people live and what it's like. We can really get mired and bogged down in the problems that we have day to day, but to be grateful and thankful for the things that we do have, and to see just how tough other people have it. Absolutely. And I guess that comes into play with the book as well, to realize the privilege that we have because of the color of our skin, or because of the money that we have, or the experiences that we haven't had, and to try and see what it's like for other people. So in being worldly, I think it just keeps you relevant, really, and in today's world, which is just so, everything's changing so quickly, and just to not get left behind.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love that particular topic that you brought up, that globalization, like being worldly, getting past our own little worlds, our own,
Yes.
you know, and in some ways over this last year, with this being quite a few of us, you know, depending on where you're living, you know, you might be under a state of lockdown or not. And
Right.
so to some degree, our worlds have shrunk in the sense of where we're physically going within our neighborhoods,
limitations,
our communities, the limitations. Yet on the same hand, for those that wanted to step out, getting onto calls, and I've attended conferences that I probably would not have flown to, but I've now attended them, and it's expanded my world by virtue of Zoom calls, you know, or whatever other type of online conference calls are happening.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, people, there's really no, I shouldn't say no excuse, but there's not a limitation now. We can really travel and connect with people from all around the world if we have that will.
Oh yeah, it can be a very enriching thing to do.
Yeah.
And you know, it's made a lot easier by Zoom or by Facebook and Twitter. But I just think making use of that is just very enriching.
Fantastic. Now, before we start to wind up here, can you share, if somebody is fascinated by what they're hearing here and they either wanted to reach you or learn more about you, can you share what your website, or what's the best way for them to be in touch?
Yeah. So I'm on all social media. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and I've got a website, which is just my name, Karen Stollznow, which is STOLLZNOW. So I'm on LinkedIn like everyone else. So you can find my books on Amazon, and you can just do a Google search as well. And I do a lot of things. I write for Psychology Today as well, and for The Conversation. So I like to be a hybrid and do lots of different things.
You do, and that's so let's, in one sentence, I'm going to say a title of a book and give us a one-sentence summary of what it's about.
Okay.
So the first one on here is Language Myths. What can we find in there?
So I'm a linguist. So that is a book that looks at the magic and mystery behind language. So whether it's prayer or chain letters or Bigfoot language, I just look at all different kinds of curious claims about language, maybe that someone's had a bump on the head and then they can speak another language. So it's just all kinds of interesting tidbits about language and magic.
Awesome. Is that then the Mysteries and Magic? Is that a different book, or is that all one book?
It's all one book, yes.
It's I see it.
It's very expensive. It's a Palgrave Macmillan academic book, so it's cheaper to get on Kindle.
Okay. Would you believe it? Is that a separate book?
Yeah, that's a separate one. So it's a book about the strange and interesting paranormal-like experiences that skeptics have had. So a lot of people think skeptics are very close-minded, and so it's a book about strange and mysterious experiences that people have had, whether it's maybe seeing a loved one after they've died, or having some kind of maybe a psychic premonition or something like that, but experienced by scientists and atheists and skeptics. So people that you wouldn't think would have these kinds of experiences.
Oh, fascinating. Oh my goodness. Now I want to talk on for another 2 hours here asking you, how did you find
We could.
And the last one that made me go, what is this all about? God Bless America.
So that's a book I read a number of years ago about coming to America from Australia and seeing a lot of the different religious beliefs and practices. I found those very intriguing. So I kind of did something I've been doing for a long time, which is maybe getting absorbed in a group of people, whether it's people who belong to a particular religion or a cult or something like that, and kind of being a Matahari and going undercover and researching and investigating what it is that these people believe in and how they live.
That sounds fascinating. So you literally, it wasn't just you did research, you were the one doing the research and going and immersing yourself in that community so that you could learn.
I wrote about a number of different, I mean, I could have written many volumes of this book, but I got involved in Scientology for a while and got involved in Satanism. And so it's not what people think. A lot of people think, oh, it's Satan worshipping and devil worshipping, and it's not that. But it's, I looked at New Age beliefs and practices as well, and just attended services and just got involved and to have an insider's look at these different beliefs and practices.
Well, Karen, I said it at the beginning. I'll reiterate it now that you are an absolutely fascinating woman. I'm so happy that you were available to be a guest on this podcast. And I went
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you had fun. We want to make it just conversational. You know, the people listening in are a fly on the wall. And I would love to carry on this conversation. Perhaps next year we can have you back, and who knows what book you'll have written then. Do you have another book in the go? Like, do you have another idea of what you want to be doing?
I haven't got any contracts at the moment, but I'm looking at a couple of different topics, and so nothing that would really help to get into at this point. But hopefully this time next year there'll be something out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight to meet you and have a conversation with you.
Oh, it was great to talk with you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. You've been listening to the Fabulous at 50 podcast with your host, Joanne Neweduk. Join us again for more inspirational interviews on topics that matter to you. If you like what you've heard on today's episode, check out the liner notes, or to learn more about this vibrant community that celebrates women over 50, please visit fabulousat50.com. That's www.fabulousat50.com.